Cool. So before we actually make changes to this composition, right now we haven't done anything that's changed. I'm going to go ahead and save as. There's a cool thing inside Blender. When you save as, you can throw a number on the back of something. I use MKs like mock or version. So when I hit save as up here, file and save as, down in the bottom corner of this, you see there's a little plus and a minus. So I have my date. I just use this naming convention for like everything. So it's the 3rd today. But this is the second version of this. So if I just throw a plus right here, you'll notice that that's just changed to Mach 2. And you hit save as. Now the benefit of doing it this way is that sometimes in 3D modeling you make choices. You go down a road so far that you can't undo them, even with an undo or autosave or some of that stuff. So it's better to honestly have a second version and be able to go between versions if something happens. And we could talk about that later, like appending docs and things like that, but just know that it's better to save as, especially when you're in early days of modeling, because you can make some irrevocable mistakes, and those are kind of frustrating, honestly. All right, so let's go ahead and continue here. I want to talk about these origins for a second, and we're going to just kind of point them out and explain what they do and how they work. So first things first, let's go ahead and zoom in. I'm not using my actual like zoom in the screen. I'm using the accessibility zoom so that you can see this cube, and it has this little dot in the center. Now, this dot is the origin that we're talking about. It is the thing that is responsible for how that object rotates. So if I'm looking at this dot right now and I hit rotate, it rotates. You can see the actual rotate goes around that origin point, right? Same thing for scale. If I just tap S for scale and then G for move, I'm actually not moving the vertex. That's not what's it's paying attention to. I'm actually moving this little origin, and that's the site that is getting the move. Now everything, the faces, the edges, the vertex are all linked to the origin. So if I'm moving this object around, I'm moving it based on where the origin is located. So check this out. I'm going to make a brand new object, and it's going to come in on this 3D cursor. And so this is something to remember for the later half of this lesson. The 3D cursor is what dictates where the origin of an object gets placed. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift A, and I'm going to add a new mesh, and we're going to add an icosphere. And we can see that the origin of that icosphere, I'll toggle in, is right on the center of that 3D cursor, and it's the origin that just so happens to be the thing that links all of the faces and edges and vertex to this object or an icosphere. So I'm just going to hit GZ and move that straight up. All right, so what else can you do with these? Origins, like I said, have a lot to do with how something rotates. If I go into edit mode and I edit this object, what will happen is the origin will stay in place, but all of the faces, vertex, and edges will kind of act independently, and they'll move, but the origin will stay in place. Why is that important? Well, maybe you want it to rotate differently. So let's go ahead and just look at that. I'm going to go ahead and tab into this. Now before, I'd gone all the way up here to object mode and switched it to edit mode. But the shortcut for that is just pressing tab on your computer. Whatever object is selected, you can go ahead and edit it. Now, I've got all of the faces of this object selected right now, and it's just natural that happens. I can click away, and that means that none of those faces are selected. So if I hit scale or rotate or grab, I just press those buttons, nothing changes. So I'm just going to go ahead and tap the A button to select all, and that will select every single face. Now when I hit the G button, what I want you to do is I want you to watch for where the origin is right here and where the faces go. So I'm going to hit G and X or if you remember, that moves all of the selected faces along the x-axis. And notice that the origin has stayed put, but the faces, which are independent from the origin, have moved. Now I've just hit tab and I'm outside of that object. I'm in object mode, so I'm outside of the edit mode. I can't move the object around or move the individual faces around anymore. So now when I scale it, watch, it'll scale from the origin point. Or if I rotate it, I'm going to isolate this so we can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to look down the Z. So as a reminder, if I want to look down a specific axis, I can press this Z right here. And so now it's like my camera is sitting right on the Z plane and I'm looking right at it from above. Now when I rotate, check this out, it'll only rotate around that axis, which is cool if you want to have like, you know, an object that has multiple things rotating around that center axis. So again, as a reminder, the way that we moved the origin point from the object is we went into edit mode and we grabbed the object and moved it along the x-axis. So scaling, rotating, and moving all work now with this origin all the way over here. So you might be asking, okay, well, how do I get that origin back to the geometry? There's a couple ways to do that, but I'm going to show you the easiest way right now. What I'll do is I'll, in object mode, right-click on the object, and this gives us an object context menu, and I'll go to origin and set origin to geometry. Cool. So what I'd like you to do now is to take a second, go into edit mode, with everything selected, grab it, move your object away from your origin, and then watch the rotation, watch the scale, and watch how the origin moves, and then be able to, in object mode, right-click and set the origin back to geometry.